Elite Ukrainian soldiers derailed the Russian convoy. There are two important parts of war: defense and offense. The Ukrainian army has achieved a great success in both of them. Today's developments can completely change the course of the war. The Ukrainian army has won a huge victory. Let's take a closer look at the war zone to understand what happened. After the great advance of the Ukrainian army, there was a huge tension in the Kremlin. The defeat of the Russian army made Putin very angry. Putin ordered his commanders and demanded that the Russian army go on the offensive as soon as possible. Russia then tried to attack in many areas. Tank units of the Russian ground army gathered in the Luhansk region. The tanks in this region mobilized. Artillery units were placed right behind the tanks. Russian soldiers were planning to take control of many towns by advancing in this way. The aim of the Russian commanders who planned this attack was simple. Ukrainian soldiers who saw a large number of tanks advancing were expected to lay down their weapons and flee from many areas. In this way, the Russian army aimed to reoccupy many towns. These invasions would be widely covered by media organizations close to the government in Russia. In this way, it was aimed to make a great propaganda for the Russian people. As a result of the recent successes of the Ukrainian army, the opinion of the Russian people started to change. The Russian people started to think that the Ukrainian army would win this war in a very short time. This is leading to a decline in support for Putin. Putin needed a new victory for his propaganda, but the Ukrainian army thwarted Putin's plans. The Ukrainian army put up an extraordinary resistance against Russia's invasion attempt. Ukrainian missiles fired one after another against Russian tanks. The Russian army was shocked by this sudden attack. The Russian tanks immediately tried to turn back, but the Russian army could not coordinate their retreat. There was a conflict between the artillery and the soldiers in the tanks. Meanwhile, Ukrainian missiles started hitting Russian tanks. It is believed that a total of 16 Russian tanks were destroyed in these operations. Meanwhile, Russia planning false flag attacks on eve of Ukraine war anniversary. Russia is planning to launch false flag attacks to drag Belarus into the Ukraine war and undermine the government of Moldova, according to the Institute for the Study of War (ISW) report published on Thursday. The eve of the one-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine asserts that Russian President Vladimir Putin's government is setting conditions to attack Belarus and make it appear as though the attack was launched by Ukraine. According to the US-based think tank, the false flag operation could force Belarus into the war, while also diverting Ukrainian forces away from the Donetsk region, where a bloody battle for control of Bakhmut has been raging for around 6 months. ISW cited Ukrainian intelligence officials who claim that Russian convoys with unmarked military equipment and personnel dressed in uniforms resembling those worn by the Ukrainian military have been spotted near the Belarus border in Russia's Chernihiv Oblast. The Kremlin may be preparing false flag attacks to coerce Belarus into the war following Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko's February 16 statement that Belarus would only enter the war if attacked by Ukraine. The report states, Russia seeks to force Lukashenko's hand or blame Ukraine for expanding the war to undermine support for Kiev. In addition to the purported Belarus attack plans, ISW says that the Kremlin is planning to manipulate information conditions to stage a false flag operation in Transnistria, a Russian-occupied region of Moldova that claims independence. ISW said that Russia's claims of Ukrainian plans for a false flag attack on Transnistria were a false narrative that does not indicate that Putin intends to attack Moldova, with the goal instead being an escalation in his ongoing efforts to undermine the Moldovan state. Russia's military is estimated to have lost as many as 130,000 personnel since launching its full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, while parting with over half of its tanks and more than 6,300 armored combat vehicles.